Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, America's youngest female elected congresswoman and certified hottie, although today I will not be simping for her, as she is yet again in hysterics over her horrific, traumatizing, near-death experience on January 6th, insinuating the recent hearings about it are forcing her to relive her trauma. She just posted a tweet with a clip of her watching riot videos saying, "The way it all comes rushing back into the body, it's like that day all over again." And I suppose she's not being entirely dishonest here, because her sitting there and watching footage of the riot safely from afar would indeed be like reliving that day all over again, as that's exactly what she did on January 6th as well. But this tiny detail did not stop her from milking the trauma train further, though, later hopping on Instagram Live the other night to cry about the hearings.
I don't even know how long I'm going to be on live because I'm so angry. Having to relive that footage. And those attacks killed people, traumatized people. This was an attempted coup of the United States of America. An attempted coup. That behavior, Ted Cruz voted to protect it. The Republicans in the United States Senate voted to protect it. Not only did they vote to protect it, they encouraged it. Encouraged it. So we are on the precipice, legally, of fascism. Understand that. This is not about two different political opinions. This is about if we're going to have a democracy or not. They were trying to kill people. They were trying to kill and find and identify people. And some people did die. This was planned. The reason why this happened on the 6th is because President Trump, former President Trump, devised a plan that if you have an insurrection on the day of the 6th, you can prevent the peaceful transition of power. This was planned.
And you know what? Normally I wouldn't laugh at someone doing this. I've had a lot of people get angry with me for being dismissive towards AOC's pain or whatever, and I understand. Most people's natural reaction is, don't mock people's trauma, just don't do it. And that would be a fair thing to say if said trauma was not linked to massive political motivations. And in this case, I think it is our moral duty to point out when people are exaggerating or faking emotional pain for political or personal gain. And to clarify, I'm not saying here that AOC didn't feel any fear that day when protesters entered the building, especially with the confusion going on and the uncertainty all over the place. I'm not just, nitpicking from the sidelines. I've been in many riots myself, including ones where people were actively hunting me down, and unlike in AOC's situation, the radical activists did actually manage to find and beat up my colleagues. And he just ended up being in the picture with me, just walking near me, and he got pretty badly beat up. And another one was another journo that I've only seen at events before. We don't really know each other. He wasn't even beat up because he was near me. He was beat up because he was near the German journalist that was near me. And that shit is scary. There's no denying that. So I absolutely believe AOC's feelings at that time are valid. What is not valid is her refusing to temper her assessment of the event's severity even a year afterwards to match reality, her doubling down on it, and more importantly, choosing to weaponize her trauma to harm political enemies. That is why I mock. Not because she's a progressive, not because I'm doing some weird internet physiognomy analysis to see if she's looking up to the left or right to analyze if she's telling the truth or not. None of that. We have far more solid evidence to show nefarious intentions behind her emotional outbursts, which I will explain after we unpack AOC's version of events on January 6th first. So to reiterate, location-wise, she was not in fact in the Capitol building. She was in the Cannon building, adjacent to it. That was not under any siege at any point. It was entirely safe. And not only this, she had been evacuated from this safe, untouched building an hour before anyone even entered the Capitol. That being said, AOC claims her primary trauma and fears came from a general distrust of the institutions and people around her at the time. When asked to go to a secure location for members of Congress, AOC actually outright refused, claiming she believed other members of Congress may be plotting against her to put her in harm's way.
And I did not go to the secure location because I feared other members of Congress that would have allowed harm to me. I thought I was going to die. I did not know if I was going to make it to the end of that day alive. And it is not an exaggeration to say that many, many members of the House were nearly assassinated. I myself did not even feel safe going to that extraction point because there were QAnon and white supremacist sympathizers and frankly white supremacist members of Congress who I know and who I had felt would disclose my location, who would create opportunities to allow me to be hurt, kidnapped. Republican members of Congress didn't wear masks.
Not only this, but when locked in an office in the Cannon building, she states she thought she was about to die when she heard banging on the door. The banging was actually just a Capitol police officer coming to ensure she was okay and take her to another location. But even after finding out he was a Capitol police officer, she was still fearful of him because she believed he may be working with the rioters to essentially kidnap her and deliver her to them. And somehow, even after it came out that there was no planned or plotted coup, no one breached the building she was in, no politicians were even hurt, and the only person who died as a result of the riot was Ashley Babbitt, who was killed by Capitol Police and was a Trump supporter, somehow AOC still continued to assert that her life was in grave danger.
Many of us nearly and narrowly escaped death.
And not only this, but that politicians like Ted Cruz were directly trying to get her killed. And as such, she stated any politician like him should be removed from office. She called for Kevin McCarthy, Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, and others to be removed from their positions for what she stated was a partial responsibility in the riots that almost killed her.
I want to be clear to Senator Ted Cruz. You do not belong in the United States Senate.
Now, of course, AOC's analysis of events is just detached from reality, but that's not actually what makes it so bad. In order to identify that, we have to go look at some Democrat talking points. Currently, the main left-wing talking point for why Donald Trump is responsible for January 6th is that he made assertions the election was stolen, thus undermining trust in government, undermining the public's belief in free and fair elections, and rhetorically giving his followers few other options but to revolt. Of course, if you can't vote your way out of a situation, well, you're essentially in a dictatorship, which implies some moral responsibility to push back with protest, or even riot, whatever it may be. This is just a steelman of the left's argument, but assuming it's all true and rhetoric suggesting the election was stolen is so dangerous that it could destroy an entire democratic process and requires mass censorship, I think it would logically follow that more extreme rhetoric, such as suggesting the other side of the political aisle want you dead, is probably even more dangerous to the entire democratic process and even the peace of your nation. It's one thing to be accused of being morally corrupt enough to rig elections. It's another entirely to be accused of wanting to kill your political rivals. Both claims, if true, demand pushback. The latter, almost necessarily violent pushback. So let's return to AOC's claims that she believes fellow members of Congress would hand her over to rioters to be harmed. Or worse, that Senator Ted Cruz was actively trying to get her killed. Not just partially liable, or even disgustingly negligent or something. No, she used the word trying, which implies intent to have her killed. If we are to believe AOC and her emotional outbursts about this, a reasonable person has no choice but to try to have Ted Cruz immediately arrested and jailed, which won't happen because AOC is obviously lying. So failing this attempt to jail him, if you still believe her, he must be taken out, killed. Because if he is not, then AOC and other Democrats are in grave danger of a man who has already tried once to kill them. I mean, if AOC and other Democrats genuinely believe Donald Trump is responsible for the riot on January 6th due to irresponsible rhetoric, they should absolutely be infuriated with her response to the events herself. Her assumption and insinuation that the Capitol Police may secretly be in on a plan working against her and Democrats, that screams deep state plot. Her assertion that Republicans are actively trying to get her killed, that offers no response but violence. That's the only response you can have to that assertion. Just today, AOC referred to the Republican caucus as the KKK caucus. The KKK literally lynch and murder people over their race. If you believe Republicans are the KKK, just trying to calmly wait while they're voted out of office would be morally repugnant. So either Democrats like AOC don't actually believe what they are saying, otherwise they'd be the ones storming the Capitol, right? Or they do believe it and they're cowards. I'm inclined to go with they don't actually believe any of it, for various reasons. For example, you may wonder how AOC thought Ted Cruz was trying to get her killed. Well, her reasoning is that he supported an election certification process and supported Trump, therefore engaging in questioning the legitimacy of the election, which led to a riot at the Capitol, which despite not being at the Capitol, she believes almost got her killed. And while even the best of faith interpretation of her logic doesn't result in Ted Cruz trying to get her killed by any stretch, for the sake of argument, let's just assume this is true. And by vaguely supporting a certification process, he was in fact trying to get her killed and responsible for anything a random rioter may have hypothetically done. If you're going to tell me that flimsy connection is Ted Cruz trying to get her killed, then AOC is absolutely directly responsible for the dozens of Americans that died during the BLM protests. Unlike Ted Cruz, who condemned Republican rioters, AOC actively supported and defended BLM rioters, even giving them tips on what to wear at their protests, attacking those calling for an end to the unrest, and she has been touting their very talking points for years and years now, meaning, by her own logic that she applies to Ted, she is now beholden to and responsible for all of their actions, making it fair to say she was actively trying to get those 24 people killed. With her rhetoric. Only unlike Ted Cruz, she was successful. But luckily for AOC, I think her logic is stupid, and honestly, I think she does too. I don't believe for a second AOC thinks she is a murderer. I don't believe for a second she's tossing and turning with moral anguish over her connection to those deaths and protests at night. And I don't think she honestly believes that about Ted Cruz either. Progressives and Democrats' threshold for responsibility around rhetoric is entirely skewed for political reasons. She will never hold herself to the same standards she holds Republicans to, and if she did, she'd be turning herself over to the police for life in prison. And this is ultimately why I don't buy into AOC's crocodile tears. This is why I think everything she says around January 6th is just dripping with this false sense of urgency and fear she's concocted for purely political reasons. Everything Democrats accused Trump of doing in the lead up to January 6th, all his crimes that made him so worthy of impeachment and banishment from every social media platform on earth, they all did, including AOC. Just, I genuinely say, her contributions were on a more radical level. Most people don't know this for some reason, but Hillary Clinton literally stated Trump stole the election in 2016. She literally said he was an illegitimate president, in no uncertain terms. There were massive riots, violent riots in the streets of DC on his inauguration day. Riots in which I watched old men get beat to the ground. I got pepper sprayed in them. I had to pretend to be pregnant to escape this crowd of people suffocating me. Businesses were destroyed all over the place. There have been assassination attempts on Republicans like Brett Kavanaugh, attacks on people like Rand Paul, anti-Trump gunmen have opened fire on Republican lawmakers. And if Ted Cruz gets shot by some crazed maniac saying that, Ted, you wanted to kill AOC and I'm just preemptively defending her, what are Democrats going to say? Will they perhaps finally apply the same level or even just some scrutiny to their own rhetoric? And none of this is to do a whataboutism or to demean what happened on January 6th. It was an insane, historic event. I think it was wrong. I think rioting, destruction of property, stupid, doesn't matter if you're right-wing or left-wing, not a good idea. Storming the Capitol, wrong, all right? It's also wrong, however, to exaggerate your trauma around a serious political event for the sole purpose of attacking and slandering your political opponents on the most obviously hypocritical grounds in history, an event you were entirely safe at, and now you are trying to make out your colleagues as being killers. So yes, ultimately, I do think it is okay to laugh at some people's trauma, especially when that trauma is not genuine or is being used for nefarious motivations. And AOC is at the very least the latter. As soon as you cross that threshold of using your own pain or hurt, whether it be fake or totally real, as soon as you use it to try to hurt or weaponize against other people, that's where my sympathy ends. That's where it ends. And that's just how I feel about this whole AOC situation. Can't do it. Can't do it. You're not tugging on the heartstrings that hard. But anyways, I appreciate you all watching this video. I'm really looking forward to everyone in the comments section making fun of the way I pronounce trauma. It's a Canadian thing, okay? Relax. And yeah, hit that like button, share, all that good stuff. I will see you next time.